Kלים Perek Beis Mishnah Aleph. Now we're actually going to start Mesechta Kלים proper. Remember, in the whole world, there are only three things that can be Makabel Tumah. There's Adam, a Jewish person, Oichelim or Mashkim, food and drink, and Kלים. And the rest of the Mesechta from this Perek to the end deals with all the Kלים and all the Dinim and the Protim of the Kלים that can be Makabel Tumah. Not every Keli can be Makabel Tumah. The Keli has to be made from certain materials. The basic list of the materials is as follows. There's a Kli Cheres, which is earthenware, which will be dealt with from Perek Base to Perek Yud, inclusive. Next we deal with Matchas, which is the metals, which is from Perek Yud Aleph to Yud Daled. And then the bulk of the Kelim is from Perek Tesvav to Perek Chavov, which is eitz and oir, wood and leather. Then we have Perek 27 to Perek 29, which it deals with begodim, and the final Perek Lamed is Chuches, is glass. All other materials are not Makabel Tumah. So let's start the Perek. The Perek starts with a contrast between Klei Eitz, Klei Oir, Klei Etzem, and Klei Chuches on the one hand, and then it goes to Kli Cheres. The reason why the Mishnah only is contrasting these particular groups of Kelim is because they both require a base kibble, or in the case of Kli Cheres, it's a toich, and the dinim are nevertheless different. So this is again an introductory Mishnah contrasting eitz, oir, etzem, eschuchis on the one hand and Kli Cheres on the other. And then after this Mishnah, we will then move over to Kli Cheres for the next 9 prokim. Says the Mishnah, let's start the Mishnah. Klei eitz, klei oir, klei etzem, klei zchuchis. Kelim made out of wood, leather, bone, and glass. Peshutei and tohirim, if they're pshutim, they have no base kibble, they are tohir. Umekablei and tamein, but if they have a base kibble, they are able to be makabel tumah. First, it's important to know the word eitz, meaning wood. Tosfos holds wood has to come from a tree. The Rambam holds the word eitz is used for anything, any min hagodol ba'oretz, not lav davka tree, anything, any plant can be called wood. And the Mishnah says on these items, eitz, oir, and etzem, which are learnt out from psukim, as opposed to zchuchis, which is completely drabonon, as we'll see later. The din is peshutehen tahirim. That means they are a keli, they've been formed by a person for a particular tachlis, but they're poshut, they have no base kibble, then they're not makabel tumah. If they have a base kibble, or mekablei and tmeim. Whenever we use the word base kibble in kelim, the Rambam explains it means the keli has an indentation in which mashkim can collect. Another important thing to know is that it's not only that kli has to have a base kibble, it's also got to be osula kibble. That means the person who made it actually made it to have this intention to be makabel. Klei zchuchis is completely drabonon. The reason why zchuchis is makabel tumah is because it's a machlokas, it's a sukkah in the Gemara in Shabbos, which brings a machlokas whether the tumah derives itself from Kli Cheres or it derives itself from Kli Matchas. But whichever one it does, the halacha of Klei zchuchis actually follows the pattern of eitz, oir, and etzem. That is peshutei and tahirim. If it's a poshut, it's tahirim, umekablei and tmein. We'll deal with these halachas later as we move over to etzem and zchuchis. But it's important to know, although it says peshutei and tahirim, there are many cases that even klei etzem and klei oir, in the case of pshutim, are makabel tumah midrabanon. Says the Mishnah, these kelim, the eitz, etzem, oir, and zchuchis, nishberu taru. If they break, they become tar, and of course there are special halachas to describe what's called a keli breaking. Chozav osam hem kelim, if you then go with the pieces and you remake the kli, mekabelim tumah mikan habo, as one would expect, the keli is now only going to be able to be mekabel tumah for the future, and the old tumah does not get reinstated. This is in contrast, we'll see later on, to Perek Yud Aleph, where it deals with Kli Matchas, where there's a special din in Matchas that if you have a Matchas, a Kli Matchas, which was Tomei, it then breaks, and then you remake the Kli, you then wake up the old Tumah, it's Chayzer L'Tumosai Hayeshana. Now the Mishnah is going to move on to kli cheres and kli nesel. Says the Mishnah, kli cheres u kli nesel tumos and shova. The reason why it uses this expression tumos and shova is because kli neser never gets mentioned again in this mesechta. Neser is a type of clay, a type of earth, known as alumina, and you can look in Tosfos Yom Tov if you go through all the protim of exactly what neser is, but because it's never going to be mentioned again, says the Gaon, that's why the Mishnah uses the word tumos and shova to tell you that whenever it's going to mention cheres, it always includes neser as well. And the contrast between cheres and kli eitz is as follows: mistamoin umetamein ba'avir. The kli cheres picks up tumah and is metame through avir. The Mishnah carries on. Kli cheres or kli neser tumos on shova. A kli cheres is an earthenware kli. It's got to have been fired in an oven. Neser is a type of clay made from a chemical called alumina. It's never going to be mentioned again in the Perek, and therefore that's why the Mishnah says tumos on shova, to tell you that whenever kli cheres is going to be mentioned, it's automatically going to include kli neser. And this is contrasted to kli eitz in the fact that mistamoin umetamein ba'avir. The way the kli cheres picks up tumah and is able to transmit tumah to a further makabel is only through its avir, i.e., mistamoin means if a sheretz, if an avatuma, or any metame is suspended or enters the airspace of the inside of the kli cheres, that's how the kli cheres becomes tome, even though it didn't touch it. If you were to touch the outside of the kli cheres, then nothing happens. The kli cheres cannot pick up tumah from its outside. Then the Mishnah says umetamin ba'avir. A kli cheres can also be metame, something which is inside its toich, although it didn't touch the kli cheres. So it picks up tumah and transmits tumah ba'avir through its toich. Now here we have to contrast the concept of a base kibble of a kli eitz to a toich of a kli cheres. The toich of a kli cheres also has to be what's called osui loses besoicha. In other words, the reason why the kli cheres has a toich is because the maker, the manufacturer of the kli, wanted you to use the toich. However, it doesn't need to have a base kibble. An example would be a cylindrical object lying on its side which has no base. But as far as the kli eitz rules are concerned, this is not called a base kibble because you can't store liquid in it. However, as far as toich is concerned, the kli cheres has a toich, and if you were to use the toich, for instance, if you were to put something inside there to rest on the base of the toich or stick it on the underneath of the roof of the kli cheres, then that would be a case of a kli cheres having a toich, the toich being made to be used, and therefore it would be makabel tumah, although under the rules of base kibble it has not got a base kibble. And the Mishnah carries on. Umitamoin me achoyrehen. There are various pshatim in these two words. But Baal Tanura says that we're talking about a kli cheres which actually has got a main toich, but underneath the base, for instance, one of these goblets which you can turn upside down, and then there's a little sheka, a little indentation on the underneath, which can also be used as a secondary toich. You cannot use both toiches at the same time. You can use the main one, and if you turn it upside down, you can use the second one. The din is here that although this is only a secondary toich, the kli can still pick up tumah from a metame that touches the inside of that secondary toich, but only through maga, not through avir. There's a Tosfos in Shabbos, Shabbos Tes Zayin, which debates whether this is the Raisa or the Rabbanon. And again, when a kli cheres does pick up tumah from such a chakak base moishav, there's a machlokes in Tosfos whether the whole kli becomes tamei or just the outside of the kli. This is a din de Rabbanon, and just to recap, it means that when you have a secondary base moishav underneath, then the kli cheres can pick up tumah from that secondary base moishav, but only via maga, not through its avir, not through its toich. Says the Mishnah of Einon mitamoin migabeh. The kli cheres cannot pick up tumah from its outside. In other words, if the sheres were to touch the outside of the kli cheres remains tahir. However, in contrast to metame, if a klicheres is already tome, for instance, a sheretz was nitla ba'avira, was hung in its toich, then the klicheres is able to be metame, oichelun and mashkin, which touch the outside of the klicheres. And the last words of the Mishnah, ushviroson hi taroson, breaking the klicheres is metai the klicheres. That expression is used because that's the only way a klicheres can become tar. You cannot toivel a klicheres in a mikveh as you could with kli eitz and kli etzem and kli oir. This expression tells you the only way a klicheres can lose its tumah is through breaking. One more very important difference between the group of eitz, oir, etzem, and schuchis on the one hand and a cheres on the other, is that cheres, the level of cheres cannot get above rishon tumah. Even if a klicheres would be in an oil ames, the klicheres always remains, its ceiling is a rishon tumah. Klicheres cannot be an avatuma, whereas kli eitz, oir, etzem, as matches, can of course be an avatuma, and in the case of chalal cherev, they can even be a sort of avi avois atuma, which we'll explain in Mitzvah Shem in future Mishnayos.